Here's your wrestling news for November 25th, 2021. And your headlines for today include CM Punk and MJF reference John Cena and Triple H on Dynamite. Tony Khan was livid backstage. MJF deletes tweet after Miz owns him in fan response. Darby Allin reveals he suffered brain hemorrhage due to in-ring accident. She conveniently, irresponsibly left. Top superstar on Becky Lynch's pregnancy leave. My plan was to help Finn Balor. Seth Rollins' attacker provides an update on what happened on Raw. WWE placed Doudrop in Nia Jax's spot on Raw. Fan throws back Cody Rhodes' weight belt. Rhodes teases heel turn after Dynamite. Bischoff gives health update on Hulk Hogan. WWE doesn't know what to do with new completed documentary, and more. We are starting today with AEW, who have been building the feud between CM Punk and MJF in recent weeks, a story fans have been pining to see. On this week's Dynamite, the pair finally had a fiery promo session that was worth the wait. CM Punk tapped into his WWE past as he called MJF a less famous Miz, evoking a huge reaction from the Chicago crowd. The Salt of the Earth fired back, calling the former superstar PG Punk, and said he wants to know what happened to the Punk he loved years ago. Not afraid to throw in some WWE references himself, MJF said Punk might come out and preach hustle, loyalty, and respect, a John Cena reference that the crowd lost their mind for. Not done with just one reference, MJF made a King of Kings reference, an obvious nod to Triple H, but Punk also had a line about the 14-time WWE World Champion. After saying that he was selling out Madison Square Garden while MJF was marking out to Rosie O'Donnell, Punk made a quip about Tony Khan having a daughter that MJF will marry one day, referring to Triple H's marriage to Stephanie McMahon. This was certainly an amazing back-and-forth promo between MJF and CM Punk. It was something special for the Chicago crowd, but those backstage weren't as enthralled. Wade Keller of PW Torch reports that Khan was livid backstage, as the WWE references weren't approved with the producers, but that there was no altercation between himself and MJF or Punk. This war of words was entertaining, but upon reflection, it's nothing fans haven't seen before. Every week, AEW makes reference to WWE, though usually more subtly than saying an active superstar's name, and this is something they should really stop doing. When Punk joined the company, it would have been interesting to hear what he had to say about WWE, a company he obviously still has bad blood with, but given that he joined 2 years into everyone else bashing WWE, whatever he has to say gets lost in the shuffle. But what did you make of this segment? And should AEW dial back on bringing up the competition that they claim they don't focus on? Let us know in the comments. In just a few years, MJF has established himself as one of the best talkers in wrestling, which made the comparison to The Miz so apt. When Ringside News asked fans on Twitter who they think the better talker is, the Salt of the Earth didn't appreciate the question, saying it was both dumb and legit dumb, and told Ringside News to delete their account. That tweet stayed up until Ringside News responded by saying The Miz was winning the fan poll, and afterwards, MJF deleted his comment. MJF may consider himself the better talker, but the numbers don't lie, as even the Salt of the Earth has to respect the lengthy career of the A-lister. Like MJF, Darby Allin has quickly established himself as a big name in the company, including a reign as the TNT champion. At Full Gear, Allin lost to MJF, but bounced back by beating Billy Gunn on the latest episode of Rampage, and has said he wants to face off against Bryan Danielson. Speaking to Robbie Fox of the My Mom's Basement podcast, Allin discussed his career so far and the worst bump he's ever taken. Allin explained that during a match with Joey Janela, he attempted a suicide dive to the outside, and when his feet caught Janela, his head landed on the unprotected concrete floor. He added, "My head bounced off the concrete and I just started feeling like everything was swelling, and then after the match, because I finished the match, afterwards I went to the hospital and they're saying, 'Yo, you're bleeding from the brain,' and I was like, so yeah." Having to have a procedure to stop the bleeding, Allin said that he can't remember just how long the procedure was, but it had a major impact on his wrestling career. "I couldn't wrestle for like 2 months. It was like, you can break my ankle, you can break my arm, but you start messing with my brain, oh, that's the worst. It's the worst. I remember I got home and I wasn't able to drive, but I felt so on edge just sitting in my room." Thankfully, Allin made a full recovery and is now considered a pillar of AEW, with many fans believing it's a matter of time before he holds the AEW World title. Last year, Shayna Baszler feuded with Raw Women's Champion Becky Lynch, which culminated in a WrestleMania 36 match where the man retained her title. This match would ultimately be Lynch's last match for over a year, as she'd announced her pregnancy not long after, and fans would have to wait until SummerSlam 2021 to see her again. This week, the Queen of Spades sat down with BT Sport, and when asked about the personal feud between Lynch and Charlotte Flair, Baszler said she didn't prefer either and took aim at her old opponent. "I have some unfinished business with Becky, and I feel like she conveniently, irresponsibly left when she was champion. If you're champion, you take measures to ensure, like Ronda at least waited till she no longer had responsibility as the champion." Despite once being primed to win the Raw Women's title, Baszler is yet to hold singles gold on the main roster, but we know who exactly she wants to step back in the ring with should she and Lynch ever end up on the same brand again. On Raw this week, Seth Rollins was attacked by a fan who wrongly believed that the former world champion had scammed him out of both cash and gift cards. 24-year-old Eliza Spencer was subdued with a facelock before security escorted him away, and WWE has said they will prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law. In a statement to the Daily News, Spencer realized the error of his ways, saying, "I apologized to the WWE for my actions. I had a legitimate beef, but as a grown man, I could have settled it a different way. If I saw him today, I wouldn't attack him. I've moved on." Though he claims it was legitimate beef, it's worth remembering that Spencer and Rollins had never communicated at all, and that the account that scammed Spencer was a fake. It's hard to say if Spencer even realizes that he had been communicating with a fake account, or if he's realized that he was catfished. Whatever the case, WWE still plans on prosecuting Spencer, as just because he says he wouldn't attack from now on, an act of kindness that puts him on par with literally millions of fans, he still needs to face consequences for his actions. Since Raw, Spencer has insisted that he attacked Rollins because of a supposed business deal they had that went wrong, but that's not the only reason he jumped to the barricade. In that same interview with the Daily News, Spencer explained that he attacked Rollins in support of Finn Balor, who had been attacked, in storyline of course, by the former WWE champion earlier in the show. "My plan was to help Finn Balor. I'm a fan. I like his aura, his attitude, I like everything about his charisma. I like everything about him. I jumped from where I was sitting at, I ran and speared Seth Rollins. I busted his lip open and he caught me in a headlock. I broke the headlock and I was trying to get him, then the referees and the security guards broke us apart." We're not sure if Spencer is aware, but wrestling isn't real. And if the attack by Rollins on Balor was real, security would have interjected, just like how they did during his real attack on Seth. Now, earlier this month, Nia Jax was cut from WWE in one of the most surprising releases to date, as many believe the former Raw Women's Champion would be a WWE lifer. Jax's release came during a hiatus from the ring in which she worked through her mental health, but now we know what the WWE had planned. On Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer reported that WWE wanted Nia back from her break by mid-November at the very latest, and when they saw that wasn't going to happen, put Doudrop in the spot reserved for the Irresistible Force. That explains Doudrop's sudden heel turn, especially after WWE spent months establishing her as a face in her feud with Eva Marie. Jax was reportedly set to return on November 15th, but asked for an extension on her hiatus, and WWE responded by releasing her on the 18th. As for Doudrop, she continues to be featured prominently on Raw, and as the replacement for one of the company's most featured female stars in recent years, the future looks bright for the Scottish powerhouse. More from AEW as last night's Dynamite saw Cody Rhodes team with Pac and the Lucha Brothers to face Malachi Black, Andrade El Idolo, and FTR. A huge 8-man tag main event, Rhodes did his usual weight belt toss out to the Chicago crowd, but it ended up coming back to the ring seconds later. This defiance drew a big pop from the audience, who were clearly not on board with the former TNT champion. Thinking on his feet, Andrade grabbed the belt and threw it under the ring to get the focus back on the match, but at some point, the weight belt found its way back to Rhodes. Once more, Rhodes put it around his waist and took it off to throw it into the crowd, and while we don't know exactly where it landed, this time it didn't come back. As for the match, Andrade pinned Pac to get the win for his team in an epic main event to close the show. Once off the air, Rhodes teased going through the left tunnel on the ramp, which is for the heels, as it seems a heel turn could be in the works for Cody, who infamously said he'd never turn heel in AEW. It should be noted that earlier this month, Tony Khan discussed the reaction Rhodes gets and compared it to John Cena, who after throwing his shirt to the crowd at ECW One Night Stand 2006, had it thrown back in the ring several times. It's been a long time since it was the opposite of the intended reaction. I've known what the reaction is for a long time, and I think it's very polarizing. It's not all one side. I think it's a mix of the crowd, and it's very similar to John in terms of how you hear a split, and there's a ton of women and kids that are huge fans, and some of the guys booing, but people are still really buying Cody. And in the right moments, they do cheer him. And we saw that when he saved Pac from Malachi and Andrade. There was a huge Cody chant, and in that context, people were really excited to see him, and the truth is, I do really think the people really like Cody. When John Cena was a full-time wrestler, he's one of the all-time great wrestling stars, and people really like to see him too. And of course, that reaction in time became generally more positive, but still, obviously, people only have grown to care more and more about John Cena. So I do think people are very emotionally invested in Cody one way or another, which is a very good thing. Much like Cena, Rhodes consistently gets a loud response from the crowd, even though it's often a loud negative response, and ultimately Tony Khan will have to decide whether to pull the trigger on a Rhodes heel turn, something WWE missed out on when they had the chance with Big Match John. Arguably, the biggest face to heel turn in wrestling came at Bash at the Beach 1996 when Hulk Hogan joined the NWO as their third member. In WCW, Hogan worked closely with Eric Bischoff, who had also joined the NWO, and during his 83 Weeks podcast, Bischoff gave an update about the Hulkster's health. Bischoff said that Hogan, who has reportedly been dealing with several health issues lately, is back to training and is also doing a couple of hours of physical therapy 4 or 5 days a week. Recently, Ric Flair said the Hulkster was dealing with, quote, some really bad health issues, but it's good to hear that Hogan is doing better thanks to a mix of exercise, eating right, and keeping active. And we're ending with WWE, who in April this year released a trailer for a new documentary all about the life of Vladimir the Superfan. Vladimir is arguably wrestling's most devoted fan, having attended countless events over the past 3 decades. But despite the trailer earning over 132,000 views on WWE's YouTube channel, we're no closer to seeing the full doc. Mike Johnson of PW Insider reports that despite the documentary being 100% post-produced and completed, WWE has yet to confirm a release date, and like many projects, it's sitting in WWE's offices going unused. Johnson added that WWE had hoped to try and sell their documentaries to third parties, such as A&E, but that hasn't worked out, and that there's been no communication between WWE and Vladimir for months. From WrestleMania 12 to ECW One Night Stand 2005, Vladimir is a huge, unsung part of wrestling history, but don't expect a documentary about his incredible journey anytime soon.